Okay, so we'll be talking about transformation in the infrastructure world and how do we drive it. And for that, I'm pleased to have with me on this panel, first of all, Chloé Claire. You're the Chief Executive Officer of NAM. I hope I'm pronouncing it well. You'll tell us a little bit later on about your company. We have also Amir Jahangiri. Amir, you're a partner at Wilkie Farr, the law firm. We also have Pierre Palmieri. Pierre, you're the head of global banking and advisory. You're also the head of sustainability and positive impact finance at Société Générale. Laurent Fayolas. Laurent, you're managing director at Ardian Infrastructure. So maybe before we dive in our debate, I would like to share with you a few words just to set the scene of our discussion. So transformation. There is probably no better way to define what's going on in the infrastructure world. We see transformation at every level and more than ever before. As a start, we are seeing transformation in our essential needs. And we all know that essential needs and essential services is the epitome of infrastructure. This is what also defines infrastructure. And these needs are changing. The need for transportation, the need for moving around are changing. We want our transportation to be shared. We want it to be smart. And of course, we want it to be clean. Changes in our need for energy, which has already been described just before. We need our energy infrastructure to be decarbonized. We need it to be clean and green as part of the energy transition agenda. Digital. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about digital during this session and probably throughout the week. We all know that digital connection has become an essential need. This is a new essential need. And we all know and we'll be debating how digital is also transforming the infrastructure sector as a whole. And beyond that, technology, data collection, data management is also reshaping the way we design infrastructure, reshaping the way we manage infrastructure. And that's a teaser for you, Chloé. So we'll be discussing about these sectorial trends, and we'll also be discussing about the transformation of the infrastructure players themselves, the incumbents, the existing ones. We'll see how their role is changing, and we'll also discuss the new players in the field. And last but not least, we'll also be discussing the way financing infrastructure is changing. We'll see that financing infrastructure is more and more about financing innovation. And this is a challenge. This does create a challenge for the good old paradigm of infrastructure financing, which used to be about long-term contracts, long-term planning, long-term and stable cash flows, established business models, and proven technologies. So we'll see how the changing world of infrastructure is challenging this paradigm. So let me start by the transformation at play in the infrastructure sectorial landscape. New needs driven by clean and smart mobilities, energy transition, digital. I would like to start with you, Pierre, because Société Générale has been at the forefront of these developments. So can you share with us your perspective on the dynamics at play within the infra sector?
Well, thank you, and good morning to everybody. A few years ago, the vast majority of the files that we would see would be, motorways, would be LNG infrastructure. Clearly, over the years, what we have seen is progressively everything that has to do with the energy transition taking more and more importance. And so I would first, of course, mention the renewables activity, project finance. It used to be very marginal 10 years ago. Now it has become the majority of the projects we see in the energy space, from wind to solar, and pushing towards new technologies, carbon capture, floating solar, and so on. But of course, it's not only on the production side, it's only across the whole chain. Everything has to do with decarbonization, investments in transport sector, building efficiency. So these are the big themes. So that's the first big driver, energy transition. The second one is everything around digital transformations. For instance, fiber development has been extremely important, and our institution, we've been extremely active in this sector. I would also mention, for example, the development of data centers, which is, again, one of the big themes. So these are, I think, the big drivers. But more fundamentally, it's not only about what are the sectors that are changing, it's the way financial institutions would look at this type of projects. Because more and more, it's not only a matter of risk-reward, it's also how you measure the positive impact of the projects you finance. How do they qualify? Are they in line with your own impact policies? So I think a lot is changing in terms of dynamics, what are the nature of the projects, but also the way we look at them.
Thank you, Pierre. And Laurent, I'd like now to turn to you. Ardian has been one of the champions of digital transformation. So can you share with us on why you think that digital is transforming the whole industry, and why you feel it's important to have a digital strategy in all your investment, all your portfolio companies?
Yes, Randy, the first thing, anyway, when you're looking at an asset is it resilient? And I think for us, it's super important, day one, at the time of the investment, to look at what could bring digital for an asset, and it can really increase the value of the asset. It can be also a danger, and maybe looking at Airbnb solution for the hotel space. So that's really a question you need to ask yourself. But I would say also on the, let's say, advantaged side is what can be bring with a tech or software solution. And that's really something we are doing on all assets. We are also having now people dedicating within the team looking at tech or looking at data. So we got people, I mean, helping. The key point for us is not to do things. Yes, I will give you some example of things we're doing for the company, but it's more like to create, I would say, thinking within our portfolio company to, I mean, develop those solutions. And Pierre was mentioning energy transition. I think it's a big topic when we're looking at digital on our side. To say, for example, motorways, airports, what can we do to help decarbonize those companies? And I would say I like one sentence from a CEO of our portfolio company in Italy. Say, those solutions will be my license to grow. If I cannot show that I'm doing things on level 1, 2, 3 on my airport, and it's not only at the level of the terminal, it could be also with the airline, I'll get some issue to grow. And to give you some few examples, we've developed with all those airports in Italy a solution called Air Carbon, and this software is measuring all the carbon emission real time. So not only at the level of the airport, but also people coming to the airport, people leaving the airport by train, by bus, by any means. And again, that will help those companies to measure, to get KPIs, and to find ways to decarbonize those operations. We get the same tool, car carbon, on the motorway. I think this is a bit more refined because it's measuring the carbon emission, but it's also linked to another solution where we took a small part of the company, Wintix solution of artificial intelligence to analyze all video, pictures, and movies. And with that tool, for example, working on the motorway, we are trying to make sure that the counting we got with car carbon is the right one, but also maybe identifying number of people in the car, in a vehicle, and then bringing some new solution, i.e. pushing for covoiturage, pushing for optimization of the traffic lanes, and that is, again, something which is super important for us.
Yeah, I would like now to turn to you, Chloe. So Laurent and Pierre has shared with us how digital is reshaping the industry. NAMR is a data provider working for infrastructure companies, among others. So first, please tell us a little bit more about your company. And I think it's just fascinating to have somebody like you on a panel about infrastructure. Speaks volume about the transformation at play in the sector. So please share with us a little bit more about your company and how data collection and management is reshaping the industry.
Thank you, René. So I'm the CEO of NAMR. So how to remember about it? It's because we are a producer of data to describe the physical world. So describing is kind of naming. That's where we got our name. Name reality, NAMR. So N-A-M-R. So what we do at NAMR is collecting a lot of data, but producing it in a very high quality and complete over territories, data describing buildings, infrastructure, territories, and the environment around them. And when we work with infrastructure and utilities, we're helping them to get micro information on their users, on their last mile, on their distribution. So we work with, for example, energy, water, and waste management companies to connect what they know, their internal data, and we will come back to that. So the consumption of water, consumption of energy, or waste collection, with the usage of the buildings, with the number of people, with the number of activities and kind of activities that are on those buildings. And hence, they can make much better modeling, much better forecast about what will come in the future. And that is interesting for investors in concessions, because now people are able to make much more precise models thanks to data. And the way I think it revolutionized the infrastructure world is that, as you explained us, Laurent, you're using many applications to look at the data of your infrastructure at any time. And those applications mix your own data, your expert live data, plus external ones. And the availability of external data is now great and very large. Just that kind of cell phone can be an IoT, a sensor for a bridge, and can, for example, mixed with a lot of various cell phone information, can give you some information on the lifespan of bridges. And some startups are working on that. Other ones, you know about all the car dealers who are now marketing their data, because of course this has a strong impact. Strong impacts on the road activities, on defects on the roads, etc., etc. So what is interesting is what is powerful, and I think again, Laurent, you explained it very well. getting the right data to the people who decide what will be either the investors, in either the infrastructure builders, either the infrastructure operators and facility managers, will give you the power to better forecast, better design, better accelerate and be agile to changes. And I think the companies that will be there operating infrastructures in the next coming years and growing will be the one who will grasp all the data, will hire the right people to analyze this data because, for example, at NEMR, we use a lot of artificial intelligence to create data. At the end of the day, it's human brain to analyze it, to make the models, et cetera, So you will need to hire a lot of very smart people to get the data right and analyze it to get the right insights so that you can grow. I think that's a very important point.
Thank you, Chloe. So Pierre and Laurent, so is data going to revolutionize infrastructure? Do you share these thoughts?
Well, I think it's very interesting because, as I said, I think we more and more we look at projects not only on a risk-return basis, but we look at the positive impact, how you measure impact. And the examples that Laurent was saying on in infrastructure, what is the impact in terms of energy consumption, efficiency, is a perfect example. So it's not only one dimension that is taken into account, but all the different impacts. And this is where the digitalization can, of course, bring much more data than we used to have in the past and have much more thorough analysis.
I think the point, definitely data are super important. What I would say even more important is the ability to analyze the data. And Chloe is right, we need some soft, we need some ideas to, find rules. We are, for example, working a lot on our renewable platform all around the world with, again, two other solutions, Greenby, Pexapark, but all is designed to gather data, but what do you do with those data? So the first one is really linked to optimization. How do I make sure that I will optimize maybe the O&M, maybe the prod of the wind turbine, so it's real time, and you can see the wind, the trends, whatever, and react, live. The other one is much more sophisticated and is just, trying to value the value at risk of all the portfolio. So we need for that tons of information like PPAs, market price, whatever. And all the ideas really to gather all this to position ourselves. Pexapark is also providing for solution, right? And you're right, Chloe, we need some brain to define a bit the logic of the rule. But again, having that wide, I would say, support of those analyses help us to position ourselves. Our view is that, especially on renewables, we'll see less and less PPAs and regulated pricing would be something much more merchant. And you will need to position yourself that kind of tools to help maybe taking edge, maybe taking smaller PPAs, maybe edging with other products. So that's really something which is super important.
Thank you, Laurent. So we've discussed a lot about digital, and maybe let's now move to the other main driver of the infra sector, namely energy transition. And I'd like here just to take as an illustration the example of hydrogen, which is a very topical subject because Laurent, I think it was last Friday, where you announced the launch of a large low-carbon hydrogen fund. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? And can you tell us whether you see that as just one additional sector or as something that is going to have a broader impact on infrastructure and at least the energy part of infrastructure?
No, you're fully right, René. We announced I think the largest platform for clean hydrogen investment on infrastructure. I think it started from an initiative, and Pierre knows that because he has been involved with SG to gather big industrial, and we got names like Vinci, Air Liquide, Total Energy, we got EDF, ADP who are also involved. We got also one major investor, AXA, financial investors, and the goal is really to build a platform to invest on all the value chain on H2, starting from pro to the use of H2 worldwide. And our objective today, we secure nearly 800 million euros. It would be to double the size of this platform, of this fund. Today, it's still subject to the IMF authorization, so that's why I want to be cautious. But I mean, it would be something we willing to get large. Today, if we look at the market, roughly, you got 500 billion of projects. Looking at what are the more mature projects on hydrogen, you'll find a size of, let's say, 150 billion. And with 1.5, maybe a bit more billion on the fund, we could finance maybe up to 10 billion of assets, of investment. And that would mean maybe one tenth of this mature market. And that's where we want to be, because we like to influence that market. You know that I think people were talking about taxonomy, but we will need to create the road and the way forward. A bit like what we've seen on renewable before. There will be discussion on maybe feed-in tariff or price for difference or PPAs maybe. And that's what we'd like to do with this major platform. For this, I think it's also super important. We are developing that platform Ardian with 5T hydrogen, and I think it's super important because all those people are more coming from the, let's say, industrial side. They've been working a lot with Air Liquide, for example, develop more than 600 million of projects. So real project, and we believe that the merger of the two expertise give the chance to that strong development. But as you were mentioning, René, I think that would be a part of our, move on the energy transition, and the big part. Yeah, you're right. The other point is also we are thinking the same way on all our portfolio company. For example, we recently signed an agreement with A2A in Italy. That's the second utility in Italy, to develop some renewable program. We are also thinking way of transforming the company by adding much more renewable in the company. Same trend with EWE in Germany. It's the large Stadtwerke in Lower Saxony. The same approach. We designed a new JV with Enercon, bringing 2.5 gigawatts of renewable, but also with a pipe of 9 gigawatts for the company. So it's not only, hydrogen will be part of the transition, but we are really thinking the way also to transform existing company. One maybe last example, in Canada, we are developing battery storage with Enalix. Today we got 30 megawatts. The objective is to reach maybe 200 or 300 megawatts.
Thank you, Laurent. And Pierre, indeed, you have played a role in this initiative. I'd like to ask you, as a financier, what are the challenges that you see when it comes to financing a sector like that, and when it's quite obvious that the old recipe of textbook project financing is infrastructure project financing cannot really apply? What's your take on that?
Well, I think we've been through this before. When I remember the old times when we started financing renewables, when it was almost 20 years ago. I think the situation, as I see it on the hydrogen, is it's interesting because it's a market where in order for this ecosystem to develop, you got on the one side the end users who need to make some investments, but to make the investments they need to make sure that the supply will be there. On the supply side, same thing. We need investments, but they need to make sure that there will be demand at the end of the day. And so I think this is why we decided to join the Hydrogen Council, one of the first financial institutions, because I think it is extremely important on this type of market that all the different players work together to design the market that can make hydrogen a success in the future. What is the role of the industrial? What is the role of the financial institutions? What is the role of the public authorities, of the European Union? What is the right type of support that we would expect? What can be applied to hydrogen that was successful in renewables or not? And then there are some specificities linked to the hydrogen sector that we all know. But at the same time, there's a lot of stake. I mean, it can be the big solution of tomorrow. So what is the role we play as a bank? First of all, we are part of the Hydrogen Council. Second, we are the sole advisor for this new fund that Laurent described. We are advisor in terms of creation, structuring, and fundraising within the fund. And then, of course, we are involved in some project financing, both on the generation, but also on some applications in the mobility, transportation, and so on. So I think it's very interesting because it shows that in such a sector, a bank can intervene in very different ways. So you will use the industry group of corporate finance and the M&A teams for this type of initiatives, the project finance teams when it comes to putting debt, the asset finance teams when you finance the end users that are making investments in applications, the metals and mining teams when it comes to working on steel projects using hydrogen in the future. And I think this transversality, bringing all the forces of the bank together in order to push forward these projects, I think is a very good example of how we see our business model going forward.
Thank you, Pierre. I would like now to turn to you, Amir. Thank you for having patiently waited. Pierre was talking about how important it is for the whole ecosystem, the various parties, to be working together. And for that, we need lawyers. Everything boils down in contract. So can you share with us your perspective on the way putting together agreements among the various parties is also in transformation?
Thank you. Sorry for my voice is a bit broken. Good morning, everyone. The transformation of infrastructure from a legal perspective is being largely driven by ESG considerations and principles. So ESG, for all we know what it is environmental, social, and governance considerations. And these are becoming largely the main pointers from the structuring of legal relationships in the context of the development of infrastructure. We are getting increasing number of regulatory texts and references where the ESG considerations are becoming ESG principles and rules. For many of the people involved in infrastructure financing, obviously you're familiar with the Equator principles that were laid down in 2003 and which are now being adhered by 116 financial institutions from 37 countries, representing the majority of the international project finance debt, both in emerging markets and in developed countries. The Equator Principle financial institutions basically commit not to provide loans to projects where the borrower is not able or will not be able to comply with respective social and environmental policies and procedures. In the same vein, the International Finance Corporation Performance Standards on environmental and social sustainability are a key and fundamental guideline for the identification of risks and their impacts with regard to the development of infrastructure and managing the risks. ever since, and especially on with regard to climate change, there have been quite a lot of texts and agreements and international references that have been created. I'll just refer to the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development of 2015, Paris Climate Agreement, which we are all familiar with, of 2016, and at a European level, a number of recent texts of law or regulation which are now used as a framework for the development of infrastructure. I will point to two at least which are noteworthy here. The EU sustainability-related disclosure obligations for financial services, that's in December 2019, where the EU, through regulation, harmonizes the rules for financial market participants with regard to disclosure and transparency with regard to the integration of sustainability risks and the considerations of adverse sustainability impacts in their processes. The other text that was mentioned earlier by Mr. Levy is the EU Taxonomy of July 2020, which provides a harmonized glossary and framework with regard to ESG and sustainable finance by providing criteria and definitions. And it's really used as a tool to counter greenwashing, which is the word that is used to designate situations where people are trying to make things look greener than they are. And maybe at a later moment, I'll explain how these come into force.
Thank you, Amir. We've discussed the transformation of the asset class, and let's now move on to the transformation of the players. And let's start by the new players, the new kids on the block, if I can put it this way. Chloe, data providers. What role do you see them playing, and what kind of interactions with the existing players, the construction companies, the asset owners? And here again, it's very interesting because your own background, you used to work for a construction company before moving to this new business. So can you share your thoughts with us on the dynamics between the new world and not the old world, but the existing world?
Yes. The reality is, if I talk about the people who are building those infrastructures, indeed, the construction industry hasn't changed for many years. We still build in concrete, pretty much the same way we did 50 or 100 years ago. However, the value of what we are doing, and not just only in construction, but all the players in infrastructure, he's moving towards who gets the right data, as I explained just before, for the growth, and what my other panelists said. You need to look at the ecosystem globally. And so it's multi-criteria, and one type of industry cannot look at the multi-criteria. So the tech companies look at where are the holes and where they can infiltrate and maybe where they can grow. And I think it's very important to look at that and maybe not see them as a threat, but more as partners to evolve. And that's how I shifted from a construction company to a tech company, because I thought bringing more agility to those old-fashioned companies would help them transform them much more by when I was doing it by inside. What I also think is the time has changed. We always say things are moving faster, and it's true, of course, but it's also weird to look at the fact that it's moving faster also for infrastructure, which works with the long time. Usually, when you design an infrastructure, you are based on the past facts, and then you plan for the next 40 years. But obviously, and since I'm educated as a civil engineer, I can tell you I've been always designing with the past wind, past heat, past knowledge of the soil and the movements of the soil. But as of today, when climate change is in the play, and we're not talking about, 10 years ago, we would say climate change is like a long time, and in 2050 it will change and so on. But we can see how much it's accelerating and how much the infrastructures of today, which have been designed by the past, needs to be upgraded and thought out and adapted to climate resilience with data from the future, which of course we don't know yet, but which players who can also help this older industry to transform the way it's designed faster than regulation, which is something very much new for us, because it's always been like very much regulated. How do you design infrastructures? So I think there's a change of players, and there's a change of time in an industry that globally worked on past facts and long time to future facts and much shorter time, and especially for today's infrastructures, to look at them with a future insight is something very urgent to do, which I'm sure asset managers are doing at this moment in time, and they also have to do for their next investments.
Laurent, on that, stop looking for at the past, looking at the future and fast pace of changes.
I think it's not only I would say difficult for the business. It's also like very simple things. Your team to be able to go in that territory, you need data scientists. We hired two recently, and it's completely a different way of managing those people, exactly as Chloe was mentioning. It's not like long term, it's not like deal team. It's okay, let's find data, let's make a prototype, let's do a first version, and then we'll see, So that is really, you need really to have that in mind, and even to hire those people, it's sometimes a bit challenging, but super interesting. The point which I think is really important with those new data is it will be able to create new services, and we don't know those services today. Just taking the example of the mass platform for the city, for example, the one having data on where are the bikes, scooters, train, cars, or whatever in the city, where can you park, whatever. The day you get those information, you're changing your model, because you can be front runner and say, guys, it's no longer, for example, proposal to park your car is much more like, let me drive your mobility within the city, and it can be please put your car there, but take a bike to do the next, 2 kilometers, and then you'll take the tube, because that's the best way. And okay, I'm just having the timing of everything, it flies. So again, I think it's super interesting to enter that new way of thinking. Again, it's really what we're pushing for in all our company. And again, it's not the role of Ardian to do things. Again, we can do some of them, but it's really to push this spirit of, okay, what can I do? What can I find with those data? What can I find with new software? And that is, really a way to create something which is brand new.
Pierre, if you can share with us your thought as a banker, how do you see the role of the banker evolving in this environment where, we're talking again about innovation, we're talking about short time horizon, we are talking about a more dynamic way to look at infrastructure, and sometimes bankers like stability, predictability.
Well,
how do you deal with that?
Well, I think first, what is clear in this new changing world is, I think the bankers need to have a strong sector and industry knowledge, and I think it has always been the case. But I think more than ever, what does energy transition mean for the shipping industry, for the metals industry, for real estate activity and so on. And therefore, you need more specialists. And this is why we keep on investing in teams, either through our project finance activities, our industry groups in the corporate finance and so on, being much more industry focused to understand the drivers. And this will enable banks to make more accurate credit decisions. Because, as you said, if when things are simple, cash flow are stable, you've got a BBB plus rating, and this is clear. But the more you are entering into a more complex world, including from a technological or industry standpoint, well, you need specialists. And we've got quite a lot. So that's first thing, big change, being more industry focused. The second thing is what I mentioned with hydrogen a few minutes ago, more transversality in the banks. Because you will not have, if I take the electric vehicle, for instance, well, you will need many competencies in a bank to be able to understand the whole value chain. So for instance, the metals and mining teams who are experts in lithium and cobalt, which are key for the electric vehicles, need to be on board. Then you need to finance the gigafactories. And therefore, someone needs to understand this industry with often very new entrepreneurs and so on. You need to have a knowledge of the automotive industry. And then you need infrastructure for electric vehicles. And therefore, we've got 4 or 5 business lines with different specialities working on what we call a value chain and making sure that we've got a comprehensive, holistic understanding of this value chain. So more transversality. And last, more innovation. I think, bouncing back on what has been said about digital and so on, we've got a team who is what we call impact-based financing, which is kind of R&D team, who is working on new business models. New business models of our clients, but also of how we can fund some activities in the future. Because, for instance, I think banks know how to finance big projects and so on, and even if technologies are new, we always will find the right mitigants to at least to see to what extent it can be bankable. Then there are, when it comes to a multitude of very small projects, small energy generation. How do you package all this in order to make it bankable? And this is where data jumps in. If you've got, in remote places, some small energy, solar energy, where you will be able, through digitalization, to get the information first, to capture the funds at the root, to be able also to measure the impacts, because bringing in these remote places solar energy will have impact on education and so on and so forth. And then you are able to look at all this and then bring investors in order to finance these new projects. It's a very new way of looking at things. So, and that's really forward-looking. So more sector knowledge, more transversality, more innovation.
And Laurent, as an asset manager, how do you drive your own investors into this transformation?
No, I think it's very linked again to what Pierre was saying. Is you need to anticipate, you need to be front runner in that sense and understand, anticipate what it could be. The same, for example, on hydrogen with these new funds. We got ideas, right? We see, I would say, investment that would be easier, like decarbonization, for example, of existing art industry. That might cost a little bit, but that could be done very quickly. For other things, we will need to, still discuss, still regulation will be super important, because definitely we'll need support, subsidy, whether it would be with CapEx or with OpEx or with tariff, that would be super important to define the scheme for the future. But you need to be front runner and you need to analyze what you can do or not. I think again, I would say there will be a lot of discussion, and you need to be open. You need to build, I mean, trust on those very aspects. What we like also with I would say the expertise, the new fund, the new clean hydrogen fund we are developing, is the fact that it is done with industrial, right? So it's a completely different, I would say, approach from the usual fund we were having, where, okay, you have to build your pipe, you have to deliver the investment. Here, there will be additional committees, for example, to discuss technical solution, and banks and SG will be more than welcome in those discussions. There'll be also ways of discussion about where to go. I think our intention is to do something global, but where are the countries where there will be a strong push for those new investment? And I think you need to bring your investor alongside you within those large discussions.
And Pierre, I would like now to call upon your other hat, which is the head of sustainability and positive impact, and you already hinted on that. How do you see these extra financial parameters defining and driving your lending strategies?
Well, I think first we've got sector policies that are defined at the group level, which so for instance, we have decided to exit coal progressively. We have decided to decrease our upstream oil and gas commitments by 10% by 2025. So we've got all these policies, and therefore, of course, this drives our lending policy. But besides, we've got our business pushes. So, and all that I explained, we are getting more and more involved in fiber and renewables and so on. So these are our business strategies, and of course we give to the business lines in charge of this the means and the capital to do it. But what we try to do, because there's the decisions from the top, and then there's what happens in a very big organization day to day. So to make sure also that there is a real incentive to look at things and to take into account the positive impact. We've got a framework, and we can classify some of our activities in positive impact with what we call positive impact deals. And when they qualify, then there is a kind of inside support where the deals will get more incentives in terms of capital, in terms of minimum return on equity required, and in terms of funding, in order to make sure that they are incentivized day to day to go and to prioritize what are positive impact finance transactions. So, and then last, what we do, and that's I think probably the most important, it's training. We invest in thousands of hours of training to all the teams in the wholesale banking world who are client-facing and who are therefore able to understand the global dynamics, and therefore, of course, the more they understand, the more naturally they will tend to originate this type of transaction. So the combination of all this clearly shows that we are reallocating our capital and our lending capabilities, I think, to those sectors who we consider are eligible. But of course, we are doing this progressively in a responsible way. We are not radical, because the world is more complex than this, and this is why we are really transitioning in terms of reallocating our balance sheet.
Thank you. Amir, how do you translate all that into contracts?
Well, there's an increasing trend of incorporation of ESG considerations and obligations in contract. For example, these are obligations that are imposed by green bond investors in the context of a project, or just further funder demand, lenders who are asking for specific obligations with regard to monitoring, to assessment, to plans to address ESG issues, and inclusion of a number of obligations in the documents, and they obviously flow down the full supply chain of a project, going from the borrower down to the subcontractors. And so increasingly, the legal documentation with regard to infrastructure development projects and financing projects are tinted by ESG considerations. But now, as a legal practitioner involved in international project finance, and not only looking at it from OECD countries, but also looking at emerging markets, what I feel, and this is my take on ESG and how we look at it, is there's a fundamental lack of one metric, and that metric is what I call fairness. And I'll tell you why I think that's an important metric, and it's not fully encompassed in ESG. What we see in OECD countries, right, is that there's an imbalance of contracts, mainly in favor of the public sectors. And in many ways, when you look at some of these, you see that they're slightly unfair. Or if they're not unfair, there's some form of disloyalty in the performance of the contracts. And I don't want to bring up all the examples that we know of, but there are a few situations here and there in public infrastructure projects where the public sector has not been irreproachable in its conduct. And that obviously affects the sustainability of projects. So before going any further in the ESG considerations, what you want to do also, you want to make sure that your contractual obligations remain in place and are sustainable. And so that is something that we would want, or one as a practitioner would look at and say, well, you know, I think there would have been a better life for the project and a more sustainable approach to this project if the approach was slightly more fair, or at least more loyal in its performance. And I think this imbalance is actually quite the reverse when you come to emerging markets. What we see very often is that contracts fundamentally operate to the detriment of the public sectors of a number of emerging markets, and actually are detrimental to the host country's economies. There are a number of ways to secure the financing of these projects, but when you look at them overall, and when you look at the terms by which they have been agreed to, you see that they're actually very unfair. There are very exceptionally high levels of public commitments are being asked for, all of them slightly behind the idea of political risk. So people use political risk as something where they come and ask for slightly more than what they should be asking for, and as a result, what we see is that the number of very large infrastructure projects in the emerging world are condemned, if not condemned, but however, they are very poorly bringing value to the economy of the country. There are many examples of situations where these projects have been financed, yet they have asked, or they've been financed through some form of a sovereign, off-balance sheet sovereign undertaking. And what has happened is that now we're talking about hidden sovereign indebtedness, and that is becoming a very, very problematic issue that we will have to confront. I'm sure that you've seen countries like Laos or Montenegro or Mozambique today are struggling with these issues. And this is going to have a significant impact on the sustainability of the underlying projects. So I think that this metric of fairness or loyalty in the contracts would have to be something that we would also need to promote in ESG monitoring and at least assessment.
Thank you, Amir. I think we're reaching the end of our panel, and just to wrap up our discussion, I would like to ask each of you to highlight one area where the Paris marketplace, Paris Europlace, can make a difference, do have a competitive edge, and where Paris can ride the wave of transformation. Maybe starting with you, Chloe.
I think just being the representative of the tech teams here, I'd say that we are very, very much pushed by all a whole ecosystem here in Paris to push for tech companies. I was in this exact same room last week with the French tech, and we can see that there are a lot of things moving. And the only thing that we can tell to operational people like you, investors like you, is to use us as much as possible. When there is a make or buy, just try us, buy us, so that we can become the European champions or the worldwide champions that we'd like to be, especially on data, because as you know, instruction in France is quite good. We've got great engineers for data, for all technologies, so don't hesitate to use us as much as possible.
Thank you, Chloé. Amir?
Well, obviously, French law. Clearly, as a French lawyer, I'm an advocate of French law. And why French law? Because good faith is presumed under contractual law. And that's very important when you look at international contracts. So going back on what I was just saying about fairness, good faith is a great feature of contracts, and it's presumed under French law.
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of is going on. If we take the example of this, the hydrogen fund, you know, French are really taking the lead there. I mean, you see, because we've got very big industrial companies, we've got a lot of private equity funds who are very much involved already in this area. The French banks are very active in infrastructure financing. If you take the league tables on renewable financing in Europe and even worldwide, the French banks usually are very well positioned because they have been investing quite a lot already in the future. So I think we've got a lot of strength we need to build on. And then, you know, we can always do better. I think we can keep on attracting more foreign investments, and then it goes back to the strength of Paris as a financial center. But I think in terms of infrastructure, we probably punch above our weight in the context of what is the weight of Paris as a financial center.
Thank you. Laurent, the very last word is for you.
I would say regulation would be, I would work with Amir. No, I think for new activity, regulation support like hydrogen would be critical, and I think we got a fantastic momentum on hydrogen where everyone, that's the topic of the day, we're seeing support from the French government, 7 billion, same in Germany and so on, but the point is really how do we use those large commitments? So I think we will have to spend a lot of time on that. Regulation, I would say I liked that maybe we can be a bit, don't know whether it's fairness, but more innovative also. Don't know, looking at airports, scope 3, where you need to see the emission of the plane this time reducing. What can we do, right? Could we get in the, don't know, concession contract or whatever, a way to lower the fees for the airline? That is something we cannot do today. So I would say let's be innovative, let's be front runner again, but very happy to work on that.
Thank you. So I would like now to join me in thanking the panelists for sharing their insights about transformation.